Hi, Vesselin. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you via
Hello.
internet. How are you?
Yes. Fine. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you for joining us today. And to be honest, I would like to open my Facebook and ask you to draw my digital profile and psychological profile. Is it possible? And how to do this proper?
Absolutely. It is possible, as you'll learn in my talk, that actually our Facebook data and digital footprints give away a lot of information about us. Some that we might want to know about, some maybe we less want to know about. But I guess the responsible way of using this technology is making sure that we're the first ones to know about it rather than the companies who analyze our data.
Okay, so I'm all in ears. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, everyone that's listening at home as well. These are pretty uncertain times, and I thought that I would be there in the studio in Warsaw to speak to you. But as it happens, I'm speaking to you from my living room in Cambridge. So, we've learned to adapt to these times, and hopefully, some of the technologies I'm going to tell you about will also, inspire you to learn more about your digital footprints, learn more about your digital selves, and maybe that will also help you to adapt and get through these uncertain times. So to make up for not being in Warsaw, I thought that I would use some artworks from a Polish artist that I really admire called Paweł Kuczynski. Here's some of his work. A lot of his artworks are quite dystopian in nature. They kind of, I think they fit the mood of these current times quite well. But hopefully I can also inspire you to kind of think more positively about the future and tell you a little bit about the research that we do at the Psychometrics Center around understanding your data, helping you to understand your digital selves and learn more about your psychology through that. So I've certainly felt like this during lockdown, like this gentleman on the right. So even more, grateful to you for connecting online and staying online. All right, so before I can tell you about big data psychology, I need to first tell you what psychology is, or what psychometrics is, which is the branch that we specialize in. So psychometrics is really the science of psychological and behavioral assessment. So we use lots of different questions that are carefully calibrated to measure certain latent underlying variables. So things like personality, intelligence, leadership potential, and also, clinical psychology traits like depression, for example. So, another way of thinking about psychometrics might be to say that it's the science of asking questions. And really, it's not so much one individual question that gives you the information, so much as the combination of questions and the response pattern that, when analyzed with psychometric techniques, can help you to see what those underlying factors are. And those underlying factors are predictive of many other real-world outcomes. So let's look at some questions from real psychometric tests. Here's an example from the Raven's matrices. So this one asks you to complete the pattern. And it's a measure of abstract reasoning, which is closely correlated with IQ. And this test has about 60 questions in it. Another type of test is personality test. So this is an example of measuring Big Five personality. It has 300 questions, including this one, number 42, about whether I carry the conversation to a higher level. So I hope that, I would be able to strongly agree to this, but, you can be your own judges of that after my keynote, I guess. Also as I said, we use psychometrics to diagnose psychopathology and other aspects. So here's quite an interesting question from the MMPI-2, which is a popular psychometric test that's also quite long. So it's 567 questions. And I'll leave you to think whether your hands and feet are usually warm enough over the course of this talk. And as this second question shows, it's a lesson that every psychometrician needs to learn as well, not every question is deserving of an answer. All right, so you've seen some examples of real psychometric questions, but now imagine having a psychometric test that isn't 30 questions long and not 300 questions long, but actually 3 million questions long. And now imagine those 3 million questions are answered every minute. Or imagine you get 5 billion answers to psychometric questions every single day. And this psychometric test actually exists. Many of you have heard about it. Probably all of you have heard of it. Many of you have already completed it and might already be completing it today again. So what is the psychometric test? Well, it's Facebook. Facebook is basically the biggest psychometric assessment, on the planet. So this is the, 3 million shareable pieces of content that you might like or dislike or engage with are posted every single minute. And what my colleagues at the Psychometric Center discovered is that you can actually analyze Facebook data and digital footprint data in a very similar way to how you analyze psychometric tests. And the reason for that is that really psychometric tests ask about your behavior. So they might ask, do you like meeting new people? Do you go to a lot of concerts? These kinds of things. And we're putting that information online all of the time. So, rather than asking me whether I like meeting new people and therefore, trying to guess whether I'm extroverted or introverted, you might instead ask for a record of my Facebook behavior, and that will tell you exactly how many people I've made friends with and exactly how many events and parties I've been to in the last 10 years. And therefore, you get potentially an even more accurate record of behavior than the individual can give you. So I'll tell you now about the kind of data that we work with. So my colleague, David Stillwell, made a Facebook application in 2007 called My Personality. And this took lots of those scientific, valid psychometric tests, like the ones I showed you examples of, put them online in Facebook and allowed people to take them for free. And the really innovative part of this was that as soon as you take the test, you get your results. So, it's kind of very engaging, very high quality, and completely anonymous. So once people had gotten their results, David asked them to opt in to share their data for academic research. And a lot of people did do that. So over 6 million people actually volunteered to share that data anonymously. And because it was on Facebook, they also had the option to share their Facebook data as well. So this resulted in a really unique research database of millions of people's Facebook records. So, the pages they like, the language they use in their status updates, all of that information that's extremely rich and that Facebook uses to improve its algorithm, but it was also matched to psychometric ground truth. And that allowed us to do some interesting experiments. So this kind of brings me on to another technology under the heading of big data psychology that I feel is very useful in general, but especially at the moment, and that's academic research. So I think academic research, has a really powerful role to play in actually exposing what's possible with this data and being able to have an open debate about it like we are today. So there are two papers I want to highlight from the many publications that were enabled by this research database, because David actually shared it with other academics as well. So that resulted in 45 scientific papers since 2011. The first one we showed in March 2013 that many sensitive attributes could be predicted from your Facebook likes data. And Facebook likes were actually public at the time, so no one even thought that could be sensitive information. And we also showed that these predictions can be very accurate and sometimes even more accurate than human judges. So what is predictable about you from your digital footprints? Well, these are just some examples. So your big five personality, your intelligence, your life satisfaction, whether your parents were together when you were 21, your sexual orientation, age, gender, ethnicity, all predictable with high levels of accuracy. This is a relatively straightforward model, so we weren't necessarily doing anything very complicated in terms of machine learning, but the strength of the signal is so clear and so strong from all of the information that we digitize about ourselves that actually you can make quite accurate predictions. I also told you that we compared the predictions of the Facebook likes algorithm to predictions of people's friends and colleagues. And this was possible because we had a database of cross ratings where I would take a personality test and then share it with my friends, and those friends could say what they thought my personality would be. So using that data, we showed that with only 10 of your Facebook page likes, the algorithm is more accurate at predicting your personality than your colleague. With 70, it's better than your friends and roommates. And when you get to quite a large digital footprint, so around 300 likes, it's more accurate than people's husbands and wives. There's a lot of potential here to actually discover what it is that you're putting out there and how you're representing yourself to others online. And this isn't just Facebook likes that we can do this with. We've also done predictions with text. So here are examples. You can see on the left the kind of language that is used by extroverts in their status updates. So they talk about partying and the weekend and love and these kinds of topics, whereas introverts, are more likely, introverts are on the right of the slide, more likely to talk about computers and science and reading books and so on. So, it's not just limited to Facebook, because you could get a sample of text from many different sources, from Twitter, from diaries, and so on. And there's ongoing research using lots of other digital footprint data as well, such as search data, music listening history, and more, to do psychological predictions. So really, all digital footprints have the potential to be psychologically informative. And why do we do this research, you might ask? Well, I think one of the important reasons and why academic research has a role to play here is that actually companies are doing this research already and in secret. So you all know what happened with Cambridge Analytica and how they, copied what we had published and tried to create their own version of our algorithms using their own data. However, you maybe don't know that Facebook had already filed a patent for a very similar kind of technology in 2012. So that was even before our paper came out. And this is basically a patent for using your private messages between Facebook users to target you advertising based on your personality. So this research is happening in companies, and I think it's really important that we also bring it out into the open so we can have a debate about its usefulness and its limitations and how to regulate it. Another technology I want to talk a little bit about is regulation, because regulation is traditionally something that people think of as being very slow, very not innovative, kind of a barrier to innovation almost. But actually, some regulation can be very effective in setting new standards and raising the bar that we expect of companies. So I have a law degree, actually. So, my idea of Friday night is sitting and reading regulation. Of course, I really enjoy doing that. And one of my favorite pieces of regulation is the Article 20 of the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. Article 20 is the right to data portability. So this basically gives all of you the right to take any data that a company has about you, get it in a convenient, structured format, and then give it to someone else if you want to. So I should be able to download all of my Facebook data and give it to another social media company. Now, companies have, big tech companies have thought of lots of ways of trying to avoid complying with this regulation, but nevertheless, there are some possibilities that weren't there before. So you can actually download all of your Facebook data now. You can download all of your Twitter data and so on. And we used, in the Psychometrics Center, we used this right to data portability to make a new kind of prediction tool. So what you'll see now on the slide is a demo of Apply Magic Source. And you can try this with your own data. If you download your data from social media platforms, you can upload it here, have it analyzed, and see what those digital footprints say about your psychology. So I encourage you all to try this with your own information as a kind of real implementation of this otherwise, not very famous, not very sexy regulation, the GDPR. All right, moving on to another technology. So, of course, when we combine the ability to predict with the ability to communicate to particular psychological profiles, then we get personalization. And I think personalization is a very powerful and effective tool as well in helping us to adapt and move forward in these times. So 2 papers I wanted to share with you on personalization. The first one was that we analyzed lots of credit card transaction data matched to personality tests. And we showed that when people spend their money in a way that fits their personality, their happiness increases. So actually, personalization can increase your happiness if it's used correctly. And another paper showing that actually when you tailor the communication in advertising, this can have a real impact on revenues as well. So this is still some of the only peer-reviewed evidence as to what the potential impact of the techniques that Cambridge Analytica claim to have been using might have been. And hopefully there'll be a lot more research of this kind in the coming years. So firstly, that first study on credit card transaction data. So we analyzed 76,000 credit card transactions and got personality test results from about 800 volunteers. And we found that, people spend their money in a way that fits their personality. So if I'm extroverted, then I'll be more likely to spend money on going to concerts and kind of doing extroverted things, going to bars and so on. Conscientious people, for example, spend about £120 more on gym memberships because, conscientious people are generally more interested in wellness. And that was the kind of correlational finding, but we also did a causal experimental follow-up where we gave extroverts vouchers to spend in the bar and introverts vouchers to spend in a bookshop, and then we measured how their happiness changes. So we found that actually personality matched spending can increase happiness. So just imagine if Amazon had a responsibility not only to recommend products it thought you would buy, but also to recommend products that would make you happier. And that second study in 2017, we showed personality-tailored versions of ads for the same product, and then measured the extent, the return on investment for people actually buying that product. So the image on the top there on the left is targeted at introverts. So there's a single image of a single person, and you can see the ad copy is tailored, and the one underneath is targeted at extroverts. And what we found was that when the personality of the advert matches the personality of the customer, then it's twice as profitable. So those people are twice as likely to actually go and buy that product. So I think these, personalization can be good both for customers by increasing their happiness if used properly, and also for companies. However, we of course need to do personalization in a highly principled and ethical way. And these are just some of the basic principles that the Psychometrics Center tries to adhere to. So first of all, control. So no one should have predictions made about them without their consent. We believe in transparency. So if someone makes a prediction about me, I want to know what the result of it is. I want to have a chance to interact with it, maybe correct it. There should be a benefit to the person whose data you're using. So don't just do predictions for the sake of prediction or for corporate bottom line. There needs to be a real benefit. And there also needs to be a relevance. So there needs to be a clear connection between the data you're asking me to share and the result that you're providing me with. So these are just some basic principles that can help us, I think. So very quickly to summarize, I think these technologies under the banner of big data psychology can help us to learn more about ourselves and more about the real value of our data and what we're putting out there. So I think social media is a technology that can both connect and isolate us in this time. I think that psychometrics is a technology that can help us to ask the right questions and know what it is we're measuring. When we combine those two technologies together, we get psychological prediction from digital footprints. And I encourage you all to go to applyMagicSource.com to try that on your own data. I think you may be surprised by the results. Academic research is a technology I'm very passionate about, a set of methodologies I'm passionate about. And I think that it's very important to create and disseminate knowledge in these times, particularly when there's quite a lot of secretive practices from certain companies. And regulation also, I think, is underrated as something that really can be innovative and kind of set new paradigms for the way we want technologies to be used. Personalization also, I said, can increase customer happiness and company profit, so it can work. So I hope that you've been inspired to learn more about these technologies, to learn more about your digital selves. And I think if we work together, both learning about ourselves and acting collectively, we can hopefully get through this difficult time. Thank you very much.